Deep in the forgotten edges of the galaxy, a lone human exploration vessel drifted silently above a planet that had been marked dead for centuries. Its sensors flickered as if the world itself resisted being observed. The crew stared at readings. That made no sense. Energy pulses surged from deep beneath the planet's molten crust, like a heartbeat too large to be natural. The captain ordered scans intensified, but the instruments could barely keep up with the colossal signals. A voice broke. The tense silence: we are detecting movement below the surface movement that should not exist. Scientists exchanged nervous glances. Historians whispered legends they had thought were only stories of an ancient guardian, a being older than the stars, itself locked away to prevent a coming darkness that no race could withstand. The vessel trembled as the energy beneath the planet surged higher, sending shockwaves into orbit. Warning lights flashed, and the crew struggled to maintain control sensors. Detected massive shapes moving beneath the molten rock, shapes so large that entire cities could fit inside them. The captain gritted his teeth, sending the ship into a stable orbit even as the ground below cracked and black smoke poured into the sky. The air outside the hull shimmered with heat and energy. The historians on board recalled old star maps and texts speaking of a guardian who once patrolled the galaxy, keeping balance and guarding against forces too powerful for mortals to fight. The guardian had been sealed into the planet after a war that had nearly destroyed entire civilizations, and the pulse the crew now saw meant it was awakening. The first sign was a low vibration that rolled across the ship, like the growl of some enormous beast. Instruments went haywire. The artificial intelligence warned of gravitational anomalies that could tear the vessel apart, and yet no physical movement was seen. The crew's hearts pounded, and tension filled every corridor. One officer muttered, "The legends were true, and if this is real, then nothing we know can prepare us for what comes next." Then the planet shuddered. Sending lava fountains high into the thin atmosphere, cracks raced across the surface, and enormous fragments of rock lifted as if drawn by an unseen force. Something massive emerged from the molten depths, a shadow that blocked entire sections of the sky. Its surface shimmered with energy. The heat radiating from it threatened the ship even from orbit. It moved with slow, deliberate power, revealing enormous arms that ended in claw-like appendages capable of crushing mountains. The Guardian's eyes opened, glowing with a light that pierced the sensors. Even the most advanced cameras could barely capture the brilliance. The crew could feel it in their minds, a presence so ancient and vast it was like staring into the soul of the galaxy. A wave of silence swept across the vessel. The AI systems registered nothing but raw energy and consciousness, and the historians whispered in awe, "It is awake." And yet it was not fully hostile. It did not attack the vessel or retreat. It simply observed, its gaze sweeping across the stars beyond the planet as if measuring everything around it. The captain tried to communicate, sending coded pulses of light and sound, hoping to establish contact, but the Guardian responded only with ripples of energy that made the hull shiver. The crew felt strange emotions, a mixture of fear and respect the legends had always spoken of. The Guardian's intelligence and of its ability to judge civilizations, but no one had ever truly believed such a thing existed until now. And as the sun rose over the planet, the molten landscape reflected the Guardian's massive silhouette, casting shadows that reached into space far beyond the planet's orbit, and every crew member understood that nothing would ever be the same. The Guardian had awoken, and with its awakening, the galaxy itself seemed to shiver, hinting at a darkness long forgotten. And as the humans watched from above, they realized that their mission had changed forever. No longer were they mere explorers. They had stumbled into a force of unimaginable power, one that could protect or destroy entire worlds, depending on its will. And deep inside every person aboard the vessel, a chill ran down their spine. For they knew the awakening was only the beginning, and the coming darkness was already stirring in the depths of the cosmos. The human vessel hovered above, the awakening Guardian. As the crew struggled to understand what they were witnessing, The massive being had risen from the molten depths of the planet, and its shadow stretched across continents like a moving storm. Its arms shifted, slowly reshaping mountains and valleys without effort. The energy radiating from it caused instruments to fail and lights to flicker across the ship. Every system screamed warnings, but the captain forced the crew to focus on observation. Not panic. Historians and scientists crowded the viewing ports, whispering in disbelief. They had never imagined such a presence in their lifetime. Its sheer size was beyond comprehension. The air above the planet shimmered and warped from the heat and gravitational pull. Emanating from the Guardian, the ship trembled as if caught in the grip of some invisible hand, and the crew could feel a low vibration inside their bones, like the heartbeat of a world that had always been alive. The AI struggled to analyze the readings. Energy spikes pulsed in patterns that resembled language, but nothing in human history or alien archives matched the rhythm. The first warning came when a distant mining station orbiting the planet sent a distress call reporting tremors. So strong they had broken their hull and instruments. They had glimpsed the Guardian's eyes through the smoke and fire. Before communications cut off entirely, the captain ordered emergency maneuvers, but the Guardian made no hostile move. It simply continued to rise slowly. Like a tide of living stone and energy, its gaze shifted toward the ship, as if curious scientists on board hypothesized that the Guardian might be testing them or measuring human intent. The energy pulses increased and touched the ship's hull, causing the crew to experience visions of ancient worlds destroyed and rebuilt. Civilizations vanishing and returning in cycles. It was not malicious, but instructive. The captain decided to send a small exploration pod. Closer to the Guardian's surface, despite warnings from the crew, the pod descended through molten rivers and shattered rock. The humans inside felt a mixture of awe and terror as the Guardian reached out with one enormous hand, allowing them to see its surface up close. Veins of glowing energy traced patterns across its skin. Patterns that seemed like circuits and natural formations fused together. The pod's sensors detected an intelligence beyond the comprehension of even the most advanced human computers. The Guardian's eyes flickered, and pulses of energy passed through the pod. The humans felt memories that were not their own, histories of battles, star systems, and entities older than light itself. Back on the ship, tensions ran high as the crew debated their next move. Some argued to leave immediately before the Guardian decided they were a threat. Others argued to attempt communication. The captain listened carefully, knowing that any mistake could destroy them all or awaken a dormant aggression. The historians consulted ancient texts recorded in star maps long thought destroyed. They discovered warnings that any contact with the Guardian could awaken the darkness it was created to guard against. One scholar whispered to the captain, "This is what the legends always meant. The Guardian is not a weapon but a judge. It decides who is worthy and what is coming may consume us all if we fail to prove ourselves." The captain understood the weight of the words and knew that their actions now would shape not just the mission but the fate of human colonies scattered across the galaxy. Suddenly, the Guardian moved its massive arms upward and slammed them into the planet, sending shock waves that created massive eruptions across the surface. Lava fountains shot into the sky as the tremors spread. The humans realized that the Guardian's power was limitless in scale and timing. Its actions reshaped the environment in seconds. Forests burned and mountains crumbled. Yet somehow the energy of the planet did not collapse. The Guardian seemed to draw strength from it, and in doing so stabilized its own immense form. The small pod, hovering near its surface, sent back images that made the entire crew hold their breath. The Guardian's eyes focused on the pod specifically, and a pulse of energy shot through the hull, sending readings of temperature, mass, and energy levels that fluctuated wildly. The pod's crew felt their minds expand, understanding concepts of physics and time that humans could not fully comprehend. As the night fell over the molten landscape, the humans observed a pattern. Emerging, the Guardian seemed to be scanning the stars as well as the planet. It was aware of the surrounding galaxy, and perhaps of the darkness spoken of in the ancient texts. The captain knew they were witnessing a being not of malice, but of judgment and purpose. The AI struggled to record all data, but some moments transcended measurement. The Guardian's gaze shifted to the ship once more, and for the first time, the humans sensed a subtle connection, a link of thought and intention that suggested the Guardian had acknowledged them. It did not speak in words, but in pulse and presence. It communicated a warning or perhaps a question. Humanity had awoken it, and now the universe would face consequences beyond imagination. The crew felt both fear and awe, for the Guardian had risen fully, and the coming darkness that it had been sealed to guard against was already stirring somewhere in the void, preparing to test the galaxy once more. The galaxy had grown uneasy in the weeks following the Guardian's awakening rumors, and fragmented transmissions spread like wildfire through human colonies and distant outposts. The name of the Guardian carried a weight that silenced entire worlds. Commanders and scientists debated its purpose while politicians argued over how to respond. Humans had never encountered anything like this being its size. Alone could obliterate entire fleets, but intelligence radiated from it in waves that no machine could fully measure. Historians speculated that the Guardian had existed since before the first star formed, and its emergence now was tied to events long predicted. The Galactic Council convened in an emergency session, calling for representatives from every major species to discuss the threat. The room was tense. Some alien leaders argued for immediate withdrawal. Humans were warned not to interfere with the Guardian. Its awakening might trigger a catastrophe that could consume their entire sector. Others argued that humanity must act cautiously but not flee. The debate raged with fear and uncertainty, clouding every voice. The humans sent delegates to the council to explain what they had witnessed aboard their vessel. The Guardian was not acting aggressively, but it was testing humanity, and the energy it radiated suggested it could repel or destroy massive forces if provoked. Meanwhile, on the planet below, the Guardian had begun to explore its surroundings. The molten landscape shifted beneath its massive arms. Valleys, flattened mountains rose and fell, as if the planet itself obeyed the Guardian's will. The humans observing from orbit felt both awe and terror. It was clear this was not merely a machine or an alien species. It was something beyond human understanding, something that had existed to maintain balance across the galaxy. Yet its awakening coincided with unusual disturbances in nearby star systems. Planets had disappeared without trace. Stars had dimmed unexpectedly. Entire colonies reported malfunctioning communications and unexplained gravitational anomalies. Historians on the human ship whispered that the Guardian had been sealed to guard against an ancient darkness, a force capable of consuming entire civilizations. Yet no one truly understood what form that darkness would take. As debates in the council continued, humans realized they could not rely on alien allies entirely. The other species were terrified and divided. Some secretly tried to make deals to abandon threatened sectors. Others considered surrendering colonies to appease forces they did not understand. The human captain argued before the council that they could not retreat. Their species had a history of facing impossible odds and surviving despite everything humans possessed: ingenuity, courage, and unity that no other species could match. And the council listened uneasily, for, while the humans' words carried conviction, there was truth in their fear. The Guardian's awakening was only the beginning, and something far more dangerous was moving in the darkness beyond known space. The first sign came as a transmission from a remote mining colony near the edge of human-controlled space. The colony reported strange shadows moving across. Planets faster than light could travel. Ships disappeared in their own orbit. Entire surface facilities were consumed in seconds. Witnesses spoke of massive forms that seemed to bend reality itself. They described darkness that felt alive, reaching Through the void consuming energy and life alike, the transmission ended abruptly, leaving only static. The human fleet immediately prepared reconnaissance missions to gather more information. The captain assembled a team of pilots and scientists. The mission was perilous. No vessel could predict or measure the full extent of the threat, but knowledge was humanity's only weapon against an enemy so overwhelming. As the humans launched their fleet closer to the affected systems, the Guardian moved with deliberate purpose. It did not follow the humans, but its presence influenced the battlefield, stabilizing some areas while leaving others exposed. The humans speculated that the Guardian was testing their reactions and judging their capabilities. The closer they approached the anomalies, the more they realized the darkness was adaptive, intelligent, and seemingly endless. The Guardian's energy pulses acted as both a shield and a warning. It altered gravitational fields and redirected stellar energy in ways that the human scientists could barely comprehend. The fleet experienced moments where time seemed to stretch and compress reality. Itself shifted around them, ships became disoriented, instruments failed. But the crew pressed forward, driven by a mixture of fear, determination, and awe. The council struggled to understand the implications. The darkness had not yet reached their home systems, but the evidence of its power terrified even the most stoic delegates. Humans reported that fleets had been lost in seconds, entire sectors rendered uninhabitable, and yet in all accounts where the Guardian's energy intersected, the darkness slowed or faltered. It became clear to everyone paying attention that this being was the universe's. Counterbalance. Its awakening had not come at random. It had been triggered by the stirring of the ancient force. It had been sealed to guard against, and humanity stood at the threshold of a war that would define the future of the galaxy. The captain convened the crew in the command hall, reminding them that their duty was no longer exploration. It was preparation for the coming darkness. And as the Guardian's massive eyes swept across space, humans realized they were no longer mere observers. Of the galaxy's mysteries, they were participants in a conflict older than time itself, and the universe waited silently for the next move. The darkness had begun to spread across the galaxy, leaving entire star systems empty and silent. Its presence moved faster than human ships could chase, and heavier than any fleet could stop. The humans watched from orbit of the Guardian's planet as communications from distant colonies reported devastation. Entire populations vanished without warning. Worlds were stripped bare of energy and matter, leaving nothing behind for sensors to detect except static and cold emptiness. The first fleets sent to investigate were destroyed before they could reach the affected systems. Entire sectors went dark, and even the Council's most advanced fleets could not locate the source of the destruction. The Guardian remained on its planet, seeming still and calm, as though it were watching events unfold with careful attention, as if measuring how the galaxy would respond to the encroaching terror. Humanity mobilized immediately. The captain ordered all available vessels to prepare for defensive and offensive maneuvers. Scientists worked night and day converting energy readings from the Guardian into weapons designs, hoping to find a way to counter the unstoppable force. The council was divided. Some species advocated surrender or evacuation, while humans argued that running would only delay the inevitable. The darkness was coming, and it would not stop for anyone. The humans began coordinating evacuation plans for colonized systems while simultaneously constructing the first experimental fleet capable of fighting at scales they had never faced before the Guardian's presence influenced these efforts. It did not intervene directly, but the energy emanating from it strengthened ships' shields and stabilized space around the fleets, giving humanity a small but crucial advantage as the first human fleets engaged with anomalies created by the darkness. The full extent of its power became evident. Ships were torn apart by invisible forces. Stars exploded in unnatural patterns, and fleets disappeared without a trace. Pilots described seeing shadows that were alive, stretching across space, consuming energy and matter as they passed. Sensors recorded fluctuations that could not be explained by physics. The humans realized quickly that conventional weapons were almost useless against these forms. The Guardian began to emit massive pulses of energy at intervals across the affected regions. The pulses did not destroy the darkness directly, but they slowed its movement and protected nearby planets. Humans theorized that the Guardian could sense the darkness and could influence the battlefield in ways they could not yet understand. And that knowledge became humanity's most valuable asset, desperate to gain more understanding. The captain ordered a small fleet to approach the Guardian's surface, despite the obvious dangers. The humans needed insight into how the being functioned and how they might align with it in the coming battles. The vessels descended toward its enormous limbs and glowing veins of energy. The closer they got, the more they felt the presence of its consciousness brushing against their minds. Humans reported visions of previous conflicts. The Guardian had endured forces older than galaxies itself, and civilizations that had risen and fallen in cycles the experience left. The fleet in awe and fear, the Guardian seemed to acknowledge their courage without words, its energy pulses communicating understanding and warning the humans that cooperation was necessary and that alone they would be vulnerable against the approaching darkness. As the fleets moved back into space, the darkness advanced more aggressively. Entire solar systems became engulfed in shadows that twisted matter and energy into unrecognizable forms. Ships that had been sent to intervene were torn apart in seconds, but where the Guardian's energy intersected with the affected systems, there was a reprieve. The shadows slowed and faltered for a moment, giving humans the chance to evacuate colonies or reposition their fleets. The captain realized that the Guardian was a key to survival, not merely as a weapon, but as a guide. It judged who could act decisively. The human fleets regrouped in orbit of the Guardian's planet. After weeks of observing the spreading darkness, the destruction left in its path was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Entire colonies vanished, and the stars themselves seemed dimmed in regions the humans had once called home. The captain addressed the assembled fleet, reminding them that fear was the enemy, that their species had survived impossible odds before and now faced a challenge unlike any other. The Guardian had remained on its planet, observing every movement of the fleets and every surge of the darkness. The humans realized that understanding the Guardian's intentions was critical. Its energy pulses seemed to interact with the shadows, slowing their advance in some areas and redirecting them in others, yet it never acted aggressively toward the humans unless they approached recklessly, and so humanity began to learn that this ancient being was not a weapon, but a partner whose judgment they had to earn. As scientists and engineers studied data collected from previous encounters, they discovered patterns in the Guardian's pulses that resembled a form of communication with the darkness itself. It seemed the being could manipulate energy on a scale beyond comprehension, and that its influence extended across light years. The humans constructed special vessels capable of receiving and amplifying these pulses in the hope of creating coordinated counterattacks against the spreading shadow fleets. The council watched uneasily as humans prepared what they called the first defensive armada, designed not to flee, but to hold the darkness at bay. The other species were hesitant to commit, fully fearing that interacting with the Guardian could provoke disaster. Yet humans moved forward, confident that their ingenuity and courage would allow them to survive where others might fail. The first human-led engagement with the shadows under the Guardian's guidance was unlike any previous. Massive waves of darkness moved through a star system, consuming planets and tearing through fleets almost effortlessly. Yet where the Guardian's pulses intersected with human formations, the shadows slowed for long enough to allow evacuation of civilians and strategic repositioning of ships. Humans piloted craft that glowed with energy patterns borrowed from the Guardian itself, sending beams of concentrated power into the void that shattered the dark forms partially and pushed them back momentarily. The captain observed every maneuver, realizing that the battle required precision, timing, courage, and complete trust in the Guardian's judgment. Pilots described a sensation of awareness passing through their minds as if the Guardian shared perception of the battlefield itself. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. In one critical moment, a squadron of human ships became trapped by a rapidly spreading shadow wave. The Guardian emitted a massive pulse directly into the system. The energy reshaped space itself, bending the darkness away and creating a corridor through which the trapped vessels escaped, unscathed. The pilots reported an overwhelming sensation of relief and awe. They understood that the Guardian was choosing them as allies, selectively recognizing human bravery and ingenuity as the deciding factor in survival. Meanwhile, on the Council's command stations, debates continued. Some delegates feared the humans were taking unnecessary risks. Others admired their courage and effectiveness. The darkness had been slowed for the first time in centuries, and that had drawn attention from across the galaxy. The humans realized that the Guardian had been waiting for civilizations capable of rising to meet the threat, and they now understood that they had been chosen for this purpose. As days passed, the humans expanded their coordinated operations under the Guardian's influence. Reconnaissance missions revealed that the darkness was adaptive, intelligent, and relentless. Yet every encounter yielded new data and strategies. Humans began constructing specialized weapons inspired by the Guardian's energy patterns, vessels capable of amplifying pulses, shields that could bend energy around them, and drones that disrupted the Shadow's movements. The captain emphasized that every sacrifice, every risk taken, was part of a larger plan, and the humans' resolve grew stronger as they saw colonies rescued and fleets surviving encounters that would have been fatal without the Guardian's guidance. Yet there was an underlying awareness that these victories were temporary. The darkness was still out there, and it was learning as well, adapting to human tactics. One night, the Guardian rose partially from the planet, revealing more of its immense form and radiating pulses that reached the edge of the affected systems. Humans in orbit felt as if the being was assessing their determination and courage. The captain gathered his crew and reminded them that the Guardian would only lend its full power to those who proved themselves worthy. The darkness would not yield easily, and the coming battles would require every ounce of human skill, courage, and unity. The fleets prepared for the next phase, deploying across multiple systems and coordinating strikes based on signals interpreted from the Guardian. The humans had learned that they were no longer merely defending colonies or fleets. They were participants in a conflict that transcended species and star systems. As the fleets moved into position, the Guardian released a pulse so powerful that it temporarily illuminated entire nebulae and caused energy readings to spike across multiple systems. The shadows recoiled but did not disappear. The humans realized that this war would not be won quickly. But the Guardian's guidance had given them a fighting chance. For the first time since the darkness began to emerge, the captain watched the massive being below and understood that every human life, every strategy, and every act of courage was part of a larger test and lesson. The Guardian was teaching them how to survive against a force older than the stars themselves, and as they prepared for the next wave of encounters, the humans understood that they were not just fighting for survival, they were learning to become a species capable of standing against the coming darkness. The darkness continued to spread across the galaxy faster than any human fleet could hope to track entire star. Systems vanished, leaving nothing behind, and even the most advanced sensors could not detect the anomalies. In some regions, entire colonies were erased in seconds. Ships sent to investigate disappeared without a trace, and the void seemed heavier. Where the darkness passed, humans began to understand that conventional weapons were useless against this force. It was not just matter or energy, it was alive in a way that could adapt, learn, and consume the very rules of physics. The Guardian remained. On its planet, observing the spread of the darkness, it did not attack the humans, but its presence stabilized nearby systems, making them temporarily safe. The captain realized that the Guardian was testing humanity, measuring their courage and preparing them for the inevitable confrontation. Human fleets had been reorganized into defensive lines around key colonies, and human scientists worked tirelessly to translate the Guardians' energy pulses into a form humans could use. The pulses seemed to communicate patterns that disrupted the darkness temporarily, but using them required precise timing and coordination across entire fleets. The first human-led missions under the Guardians' guidance faced unimaginable danger. Waves of darkness twisted space around them, and massive shadows attacked with speed and intelligence that no human or machine could anticipate. The pilots described the sensation of time stretching and bending their minds, struggling to comprehend the scale of the threat. Yet the Guardians' energy pulses acted as a lifeline, creating pockets of stability that allowed them to maneuver and strike strategically. During one critical engagement, a human fleet became trapped. Between two advancing waves of darkness, entire vessels were shredded before they could fire, but a massive pulse from the Guardians split the waves and created a corridor for the surviving ships to escape. Some ships were damaged beyond repair, but countless lives were saved. The pilots reported an overwhelming sense of presence emanating from the Guardian, a consciousness so vast and ancient it seemed to occupy the entire battlefield. Humans began to realize that their survival depended not on weapons alone, but on understanding and aligning with the Guardian's will. It was both teacher and protector, guiding them to act with courage and ingenuity rather than fear. Meanwhile, reports from distant systems revealed that the darkness was adapting rapidly to human tactics. Learning to anticipate evasive maneuvers and counterattacks, it became clear that victory would not come from brute force alone. The captain convened, the fleet's commander stressing the importance of cooperation, discipline, and creativity. Every pilot, engineer, and soldier had to act in harmony with the Guardian's pulses to exploit weaknesses in the darkness. The humans began developing specialized ships designed to amplify and channel the Guardian's energy across multiple vectors, creating coordinated strikes. The technology was experimental and dangerous, but every successful deployment gave humanity more hope and understanding of the forces they faced. As weeks passed, the Guardian gradually revealed more of its immense form moving. Across its planet, it emitted pulses that reached across entire star systems, creating protective fields and guiding fleets toward safer routes, while simultaneously influencing the patterns of the darkness. The humans realized that the Guardian was testing their resolve.